What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video, and today we're going to be going over the Magicka Sorcerer. We are going to be doing an alternative to the non-pet build. This is going to be a heavy attack build. I made this build for one of my friends. She was not very satisfied with a Force Pulse build, and she felt like it was too clunky to manage, so she asked me if I could make a heavy attack non-pet build for her. And so this is what I've came up with. A lot of this gear here is going to be fairly high level. You're going to need a Maelstrom and a Master's Lightning Staff, for example. But I will show you guys kind of what alternatives you can use if you don't have either of those weapons. So don't feel like you can't use this build. You're just going to have to take out some of the higher end weapons and replace them with some other stuff in order to make it work. So starting off here with gear. For 5-piece, it's going to be Netch's Touch. This is mainly because we are utilizing a lot of shock damage in our build. We have 2 lightning staves. We're going to be using Destructive Clench. We're going to be heavy attacking, obviously, with our lightning staves. So Netch's Touch will typically outparse Julianos if you're using this build. That being said, you can use Julianos if you don't have the time or don't want to farm Netch's Touch. You will lose a little bit of DPS, but it's not going to be that much because we still are using we're still using Curse, so not all of our damage is coming from shock damage, but I'd say maybe about 85 to 90% of our damage is going to be coming from shock damage, so Netch's Touch will outparse Julianos by a small amount. For our monster helm, we're going with Ilambris. I have a medium and heavy piece here, just because Netch's Touch only comes in light. If you are using Julianos, you can go with the heavy chest and use a light piece here instead of medium heavy. It's kind of up to you how lucky you are with chest drops and helm drops from Crypt of Hearts. Now I am using 2 Magicka enchants. That's because this particular build doesn't have any problems with sustain because it is a heavy attack build. So you don't need to use Witch Mothers. You can go with Blue Food, max health, max Magicka, in order to maximize your damage. For our jewelry, we're going with 3-piece Master Architect. You can use any of the Minor Slayer sets, so that's Infallible Aether or Moondancer. Or you can go with Master Architect. If you don't have access to any of those 3 sets, you can go with 3-piece Willpower instead. You don't need any regen glyphs because, again, this is a heavy attack build, so you don't need any additional sources of sustain. So you can go with 3 spell damage on your jewelry here, like I have here. Now for our weapons. So our front bar, we're going with the Master's Lightning Staff infused with the shock damage enchant, and on our back bar, we're going with the nirnhoned Maelstrom Lightning Staff with a weapon damage enchant. Pretty much par for the course when it comes to meta. Now if you don't have a Maelstrom or a Master's Lightning Staff, that's not a problem. You can just use Julianos instead. You can just craft it. Ideally, you're going to have nirnhoned weapon damage on your back bar, but you can go with infused if you prefer. And obviously, you're going to want infused with a shock damage enchant on your front bar as well. So the specific stabs you use aren't going to be very important. Yes, you will lose DPS if you're not using a Maelstrom or a Master's Lightning Staff, but it shouldn't be that big of a drop. You're only really going to see maybe a 3k to 4k drop, or about a 10% difference with neither of them. So I have tested it out with just random staves, and while it is a DPS drop, you can still pull around 28-29k without Maelstrom or Master's staves. So it's still possible to get very good DPS even without them. So that's kind of my suggestion. If you don't have a Maelstrom or Master Staff and you don't have any sort of Trials Minor Slayer set, just go with 3-piece Willpower, and then just use any infused front bar, and then any infused weapon damage enchant on your back bar. You can go with nirnhoned. Nirnhoned is going to give you a little bit more damage during your execute phase, because our execute is going to be on our back bar, but it's kind of up to you. You can go with infused just as well. So for Monster Helm, I found that Ilambris pulls about the same DPS, if not a little bit higher than Skoria, but you can go with Skoria if you would like, if you want that a little bit of extra health. But Ilambris will pull typically a little bit ahead of Skoria here. Even though you're only able to get the lightning proc, somehow it still manages to pull ahead just by a hair, not by too much. Let's see, for our attributes, all of our points are into Magicka because, again, we're using Blue Food, so we are hitting the 17k health kind of recommended amount there. Our Apprentice, our Mundus stone is going to be the Apprentice for the extra spell damage. You can go with the Lover if you're going with 4-man content or you're doing solo content like VMA. That's kind of up to you to choose. Just remember that the penetration cap is 18,200, so you don't want to go over that amount with the lever. So if you do end up going over that amount with the lever stone, then you're going to be over penetrating, and that's when you're going to see DPS loss. So in that instance, particularly in 12-man content, if you're having Infused Torx, Crusher, and Alkosh, the Apprentice will win out. I am a vampire. You don't have to be a vampire. Again, you don't have any sustain issues because this is a heavy attack build, but I am a vampire nonetheless. You don't have to be stage 4 for the 10% additional Magicka regen. You can be stage 2. I would recommend being at least stage 3 in order to get the Undeath passive, which helps out your survivability, but it's kind of up to you. You can stick with stage 2 if you don't want that additional fire damage. I am a Breton for this particular build because we're utilizing so much shock damage. Altmer or the High Elves are going to give you the best in terms of DPS output, followed by the Dunmer, the Dark Elves. That's because Altmer have 4% additional shock damage, as well as the 10% additional max Magicka and the 9% Magicka regen. Dunmer, on the other hand, only get 9% max Magicka and only 2% additional shock damage, so they get a little bit lower in terms of DPS potential. Bretons come after them because they have a 10% max Magicka boost, but they don't have any addition to shock damage. They do have additional spell resistance, which is nice for your survivability. You can see here my spell resistance is almost 17k, which is very nice. And they do have a little bit of a spell reduction cost. I believe it's 3%. But again, we're using a heavy attack build, so that extra sustain we're getting, you're not really going to feel it that much, except during the execute phase. Other potential options, kind of a dark horse, is going to be the Argonians. You only get 5% additional Magicka, but you do get additional health. I believe it's 5% additional health. Plus you get additional resources back. You get health, Magicka, and stamina whenever you drink a potion, so that's very helpful for sustain. So Argonians are a viable option for Magicka DPS, just not necessarily the best option. Going over our skills for our front bar, we have Boundless Storm. This is here for our Major Resolve and Major Ward, which is our physical and spell resistance buffs. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. It's also here for the additional I believe it's 2% extra damage. Let's see. Yes, it's you get 2% additional spell damage for having it slotted, so you don't have to use it. I do recommend using it, though, in your rotation, just because it will give you a little bit more survivability. And if you are within melee range, some strats require every DPS be within melee range. It gives you a little bit additional DPS. But you don't have to use it if you don't want to, but I highly recommend you use it anyways. Going with Shock Clench, you can go with the other morph, Shock Reach. It doesn't really matter which one you choose. Bound Aegis, Haunting Curse, Inner Light, and Shooting Star. This Shooting Star here is just here for the 2% additional Magicka max Magicka that you get from the Mage's Guild passive. You can replace this with another ultimate, preferably something from the Sorc Alliance, so something like Negate Magic, either of the morphs. Suppression Field will give you a little bit more DPS compared to Absorption Field if you want to use Negate. The Aetheric Summoning, you can go with Summon Storm Aether if you'd like. Your primary ultimate is going to be on your back bar, which is going to be your Thunderous Rage. So it's kind of up to you whether you want the 2% additional max Magicka or if you want the 2% additional spell damage. I found that there really didn't make that much of a difference either way. For our back bar, we have our Execute, Mage's Wrath, Liquid Lightning, Bound Aegis, Blockade of Storms, and this is where we would put our ward, Hardened ward or Empowered ward, whichever one you prefer. Hardened will give you a little bit more of survivability because you just have a larger shield, but Empowered will give your allies a little bit better Magicka regen by giving them minor intellect. So it's kind of up to you. You only really need one Sorc running Empowered ward in order to get that minor intellect boost. So if you already have a Sorc running Empowered, you might as well go with Hardened to give yourself a little bit more survivability. But for parse purposes, we're going to be sticking with Elemental Drain. And then our ultimate, Thunderous Rage, this is going to be our primary ultimate that we use. We will be using Essence of Spell Power, which gives us Major Sorcery, Major Prophecy, and restores our Magicka. So make sure to use your potions whenever you're doing vet trials. It's just a DPS boost. They are expensive, but it is worth it if you are going for things like Score. If you're just going for clears, you might not necessarily need them, but it's still worth running them regardless, because a higher DPS means a faster kill, which means less time to get killed. If you do want to use Surge, because this build is fairly useful for VMA, you can replace Inner Light here on the front bar with Surge instead. So you have Shield on your back bar and you have Surge on your front bar here, or you can replace the Execute with Surge if you'd like to, so you have Surge and your Shield on the same bar. That's kind of up to you how you want to run it, but you can use Surge either in place of the Execute or Inner Light. If you're doing it for For raids though, I'd probably say give up the Inner Light, or even Boundless Storm. But you shouldn't be using Surge in raids anyways, because you should be getting major sorcery from Essence of Spell Power. Now for our CPs, I am on the PTS, but I did not allocate the extra 10 CPs that you get on the PTS, so this is accurate for the live server. Whoops. Let's do our green CPs first. I have 75 in Arcanist, 75 in Tenacity, which leaves 80 points, which you can divide among these next 3 nodes however you'd like. 26 into Warlord, 26 into Tumbling, and 28 into Shadow Ward. Again, you can kind of play around with them. For example, if you want the Treasure Hunter passive, then you can put 75 into here and put the remaining 5 over here somewhere. For our blue CPs, 34 into Elfborn, 49 into Elemental Expert, 35 into Spell Erosion, 37 into Master at Arms, and 75 into Thaumaturge. Actually, I am going to change up the CPs a little bit here. So we're changing up the CPs here mainly because we aren't actually doing that much direct damage with this build. Our heavy attacks count as dot damage, and our only sources of direct damage are going to be coming from the final tick of your heavy attack, any light weaves you do, your execute, and the first hit of destructive clench and haunting curse. So it's actually not that many sources of direct damage. So a lot more of your sources of damage are going to be coming from dots. So we're actually going to take points out of Master at Arms. You're going to have 28 into Master at Arms, 56 into Elemental Expert, 44 into Elfborn, and 37 into Spell Erosion. So that's actually going to be our CP distribution here. Now for Spell Erosion, you can take points out of Spell Erosion. This particular setup is for my raid group, where we only get Elemental Drain, Power of the Light, and Infused Thorax Crusher. We don't use Alkosh, so that's why I have 37 points into Spell Erosion. So depending on if you get Alkosh or not in your group, you might need to take points out of Spell Erosion and put them elsewhere. For this particular build, I'd probably put them into Elfborn first, and then try to get Elemental Expert up to, I believe at 64 is the next jump point. Again, you don't need to put as many points into Master at Arms for this build, because you don't have that many sources of direct damage. Of course, you always want to have 75 in Thaumaturge. You don't want to touch this just for the Exploiter passive. This is going to change into PTS, but for live, maintain that Exploiter passive. Finally, our red CPs. This particular setup is a one-size-fits-most scenario. Depending on the content you're going to run, you might need to reallocate your CPs accordingly. For example, in Maw of Lorcage, you generally take more magic damage compared to physical damage, so you might want to put more points into Elemental Defender and take them out of Hardy, but that is all dependent on content. So for me, I have 44 into Ironclad, 40 into Thick Skin, 56 into Hardy and Elemental Defender, and 34 into Bastion. Actually, I need to take 10 points out of here, because I just realized I took too many points in here. So this is actually what I would be on live right now, actually, for blue CPs. I apologize, I forgot I had 10 extra CPs. So 37 Elfborn, 56 Elemental Expert, 36 Spell Erosion, 26 Master at Arms, 75 Thaumaturge. I apologize, I forgot that I'm on the PTS and I have 10 extra CPs compared to live. Alright, so now on to the rotation. The rotation is very simple. It's basically 4 buttons and heavy attack. So I'm going to show you guys what the rotation looks like on the 3 million dummy here. So obviously, before you enter battle, you're going to want to buff up with your potions. You're going to use Boundless Storm in order to get your resistance buff. Then you're going to want to open up with your ultimate. So I won't be doing that because I do want to save my ultimate for the actual 6 million dummy parse. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to start on your back bar, drink your potion, buff up Boundless Storm. You're going to light weave between these, and you're just going to heavy attack on your front bar here. And then from there, it's basically you watch your dots, you light weave between everything, and just heavy attack between your dots. It's a very simple, easy rotation. Like I said, it's only watching your dots and clicking those buttons, and other than that, you're just holding down the left mouse button. You do want to still light weave between all your abilities, of course. That just increases your DPS. and then you just watch it. It's just very simple. It's just watching dots and using them when you need to. You do want a heavy attack on your front bar, and then swap to your back bar. You just want to do it on your front bar because you get your shock enchants off while you're on your front bar there. And so as you can see, we have absolutely no sustain issues at all because of all of our heavy attacks that we're doing. So in terms of skill prioritizations, because you're just dot watching, it's very easy to maintain all your skills up, but the most important skills to keep up are going to be Liquid Lightning and Blockade of Storms. So these two are going to be your top two contributors to your DPS. And then from there, you're going to want to try to maintain Boundless Storm if you are going to be using it for that survivability boost. And then from there, Destructive Clench would be your last priority. You don't really need to maintain Curse. Curse is just there for some extra damage. Just remember, don't overcast it, so you want to make sure that second explosion goes off before you recast Curse, otherwise you lose that second tick there. So now we're going to go ahead and do a 6 minute WPAR so you guys can get an idea of the amount of DPS you can pull on this build. There is a little bit of lag on the PTS right now, so it's going to be a little bit choppy. I will try to narrate, but the rotation is very, very simple, so I don't anticipate having to talk too much during the parse. So without further ado, here we go. So I won't be using Boundless Storm because I'm going to be assuming that you're going to be playing at range. But otherwise, yes, you would want to keep Boundless Storm up. Oh, what the hell, I'll use it. So remember, you can kind of queue your next ability when you heavy attack. Basically, when you're holding down your mouse button and going through the heavy attack animation, just hit the button for the ability that you want to cast after your heavy attack, and right when your heavy attack ends, you will cast it. This doesn't work with bar swaps though. You still need to wait for the heavy attack animation to completely end before you bar swap, otherwise you will just cancel out of the heavy attack animation. You can see there we are getting some lag. I don't believe it'll affect our parse too much. And then we're going to be using our Destra ult as our primary ultimate. As we can see, it's a very boring rotation. I personally don't like it. I prefer my Force Pulse rotation, even if sustain isn't as good. Just because it feels more active, and I prefer a more active rotation compared to just, you know, 3 buttons and heavy attack. But this is a very simple rotation. Actually, yeah, I believe the lag that we're seeing actually is affecting our parse a little bit. It's just slowing everything down, so things aren't as smooth. Fortunately, I am on the PTS, and CMX Comet Metrics is currently broken on the PTS, so I can't show you guys the previous parses that I've done. But it does seem like the lag on the server right now is affecting our parse. It's probably going to be very apparent here when I try to weave during our execute. So execute's basically you're on your back bar and you're just light weaving Mage's Wrath. So this is the only part of the rotation where you might run into the sustain issues depending on how long your execute lasts for. But you should be going at execute with 100% Magicka anyways with this build. So there we go. Like I said, I am on the PTS, so Comet Metrics is not working properly. But we pulled, you can see on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, we pulled 32.4k, which is below my my Force Pulse build, the one that uses the Asylum Staff by about 2k, but this is a much simpler rotation. It's a lot easier to do. While the weapons are not the easiest to obtain, like I said, you can replace them with Julianos weapons, or any weapons really, as long as you have the same traits and enchants. And you will see a drop. You'll probably pull around 28 or so DPS, 28, 29, depending on how tight your rotation is. But that's still very good. It's still easily capable of clearing at least the Craglorn Vet trials. I'm not sure if you would be able to clear necessarily Vet Maw or Vet Hoth with 28k, 29k DPS, but you can definitely go to the Vet Craglorn trials with this setup. So that's it for this build video. Hope you guys found it informative. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions about it, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.